I call on Government Orders of the Day, numbers 1 to 2.
Appropriation 2014-15 Estimates Bill, Committee Stage continued. Gambling Amendment Bill number 2, Committee Stage.
I declare the House and Committee for further consideration of the Appropriations 2014-15 Estimates Bill and for consideration of the Gambling Amendment Bill number 2.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman. We're dealing with the order. I've just put the committee into the House into committee to deal with.
I'm sorry, I was distracted, and we're both overheard. Just heard the gambling bill. So thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, it can be again. Members, the House in committee for further consideration of the Appropriation 2014-15 Estimates Bill and consideration of the Gambling Amendment Bill number 2. We turn first to the Appropriation 2014 Estimates Bill. I can advise that the committee that 2 votes that were unavailable for consideration yesterday, vote State Services and vote Sport and Recreation, are now available. They will be considered in the order of seniority of the responsible minister. Members, when we were last considering this bill, we were debating vote social development. Alfred Naro had the call and he has 1 minute and 45 seconds remaining if he wishes. The question is that the motion be agreed. The question is that vote social development stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. You got the schedule? Members, the question is that vote defence stand part of the schedules. I call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, at the commencement of this debate, you made the observation, after the edification of the House, that votes will be debated in descending order according to the rank of the minister. It is rather telling, rather revealing, one could say, that vote defence is languishing away down the order at number 10. Number 10, Mr. Chairman, not even on the front bench. In a bygone era, Mr. Chairman, not so very long ago in actual fact, only about 30 years, hardly a previous geological age by any reckoning, defence was regarded as a matter of great importance. Ministers of Defence were regarded as senior cabinet ministers. This very serious and important portfolio was entrusted to a minister of experience and standing, a minister ranked no lower than perhaps 4th or 5th in the government. That this is no longer the case is not a reflection on the importance of defence, Mr. Chairman. It is a reflection of the fact that this government appears unable to understand that importance. And that lack of understanding is illustrated clearly by the wholly inadequate level of funding allocated to defence by this administration. They trumpet the quite mythical $500 million, which they claim is additional funding afforded to defence in the budget, Mr. Chairman. The reality, of course, is that it is $500 million over 4 years, and it would only go part of the way to replacing the roughly equivalent amount which they have pruned out of defence over the past 2 years. So it is sleight of hand, Mr. Chairman. Give with one hand and take with the other. 2%, Mr. Chairman, that is the level of expenditure that New Zealand First would like to see allocated to defence. 2% of GDP. It isn't a massive slice of the pie. 2% to ensure our sovereignty. 2% to secure our borders. 2% to protect our exclusive economic zone and our fisheries resource, to contribute to the security of the region and to support the efforts of our regional partners and allies. 2% is the figure Australia is working towards, Mr. Chairman, and Singapore has already long since exceeded it. But not New Zealand. No. Under this government, the defence expense is less than 1%, and from that paltry sum, the government claws back revenues in the form of GST and road user charges and a capital charge which relates to the cost of servicing expenditure on major projects and acquisitions, and then, of course, depreciation. So the actual amount of funding the NZDF has to work with is even more miserable. The defence of the nation is the first responsibility of government, Mr. Chairman, and less than $1.100 is manifestly insufficient as a measure of the importance of this truth. And then what they do spend money on, Mr. Chair, what this government does allow defence to actually procure and operate, fails to reflect the realities of the world we live in. There was never any such thing as the benign strategic environment, Mr. Chair. In the real world, there are still wars and conflicts. In the real world, nations are not always nice to one another, despite the existence of the United Nations. Diplomacy is a wonderful thing, but only a fool would presume that people and nations could rely on it alone. There comes a time, Mr Chairman, there are times when it is also necessary to wave the big stick. As we debate, Mr Chair, the Middle East is dissolving into chaos yet again. Iraq and Syria are embroiled in civil conflict. Russia and Ukraine are facing off. The South China Sea has several potential conflicts threatening to spark up at any moment. North Korea is testing new missiles. Japan is talking openly about arming herself with nuclear weapons. In the midst of this melee, New Zealand stands blissfully unconcerned. We have no force in the Air Force, notwithstanding that it is possible to drop a Mark 82 bomb on the beach at Kaipara from an Orion retrofitted with a bolt-on hardpoint. Hallelujah! The Orions can drop bombs, Mr Chair. They can't jink or dogfight or avoid air-to-air missiles or defend themselves from ship-launched anti-aircraft missiles or even hunt submarines anymore, like they were originally bought to do, but they can drop old 20th century free-fall iron bombs. We are saved. Not. Are the Air Force's Orions also going to be fitted with infrared search and track, or data links, or paveway designators so they can drop smart bombs as well? I asked the Minister. Or are we relying once again, as has been the policy of this government, and the one before it I might add, on the hope that we won't ever actually have to use any of these things in anger? I asked the Minister, but the reality is he probably doesn't know what any of those things are. Defence is a side interest for this Minister at best, Mr Chairman. His real passions are finance and foreign affairs. Those things are admirable and necessary, granted, but it would be nice at the very least to have a Minister of Defence who cared enough about defence to argue in Cabinet for a credible-sized slice of the pie. On the subject of admirals, Mr Chairman, the Navy is down to one frigate because the other one is tied up in Canada having an extended refit. It will be out of service for more than a year, for the duration of which New Zealand will have one ship to patrol a maritime territory covering 1/6 of the Pacific Ocean. Quite right, Mr Goff. One ship, Mr Chairman. The refits to Te Kaha and Te Mana will amount to around half the cost of replacing them. And I ask, why is this maintenance not being done in Whangarei? Why is this government not trying to get more bang for our defence buck by growing the ability of domestic engineering to take on such tasks? We could be building patrol ships here, Mr Chairman. We could be and we should be investing. Mr Chair?
I call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Chair. We should be investing in developing a shipbuilding industry here in New Zealand, anchored on the requirements of the military, and from there being able to construct everything from coastal freighters to fishing boats. Instead, we have a navy cobbled together from imported civilian standard vessels based on designs for ferries and coastguard boats and the like, and two poor, tired old MECO 200 German frigates which are being flogged to death because they are two ships being required to do the work of four. In the 50s and 60s, Mr Chairman, New Zealand maintained an operational fleet of 6 frigates. It was a core capability, and for a nation of 2 million people with no exclusive economic zone, it was entirely affordable. What has changed, Mr Chairman? What has changed about the reality of the world we live in since those days, apart from the fact that it has become less stable and less safe? Our population has doubled, and we have a vastly larger chunk of ocean to look after. We could be forgiven for thinking that the Navy's tasking requirement now calls for something closer to 8 frigates than 2. But that reality does not appear to have worked its way through the collective skulls of this government, who disregard the need for credible defence, relegate it to 10th on the Cabinet priority list and base their decisions on financial considerations which have nothing to do with defending the nation and everything to do with making bottom lines look good. So we have no combat aircraft and nowhere near enough of a blue water navy, and an ever-shrinking army which is perilously close to not being able to properly support the SAS, let alone mount an operation on the scale of Timor, where we sustained a battalion on rotation for more than a year. The New Zealand Defence Force simply doesn't have a sharp end anymore, Mr Chairman, and because of that...
Order. The member is... We're on vote defence, not to vote Defence Force. There are 2 separate votes here, and the member is straying into Defence Force. So just bring you back. This is about defence, not Defence Force.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Because of that, it's becoming increasingly difficult to recruit and retain enough good people to maintain core capabilities. Simply throwing money in the wrong directions within the context of an ever-decreasing budget is not the way to approach defence, Mr Chairman. We need to address the very real issue of pay and conditions and acknowledge that our people are underpaid in relative terms. But money alone will not fix this problem, Mr Chair. At the heart of it is a lack of understanding of what motivates people to join the military. They do not join for money. George Orwell said, "We sleep safe in our beds because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who would do us harm." That is why they join, Mr Chair. Good men and women join up because they are motivated by a desire to fight the good fight. They are motivated to fight the righteous fight, to protect the innocent, to stand in defence of the nation. To do that, they need a military which has a sharp end, which is resourced and intended to operate as a credible force. But this government just doesn't get that. That is why vote defence is so pitifully insufficiently meagre, Mr Chair, and why defence expenditure is so woefully misdirected. New Zealand First, in a position of influence over government, will set this matter to rights, Mr Chairman. We will resource defence properly, and we will give it back the focus and the breadth of tools that it needs. This is a dreadful appropriations bill, Mr Chairman, and the re-election cannot come soon enough. Thank you.
The question is that vote defence stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that vote defence force stand part of the schedules.
Mr Chairman.
Phil Goff.
Mr Chairman, 8 months ago